Well, the DOJ confirmed 2 weeks ago the hands up, don't shoot narrative in Ferguson, Missouri was based on a lie. So why is the guy who started it not being held accountable? Here's Dorian Johnson hours after Michael Brown was killed by Officer Darren Wilson and the lie that started it all.
Once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn and he fired several more shots. And my friend died.
2 separate independent investigations have found Dorian Johnson made that story up. But Johnson, who also has a 2011 warrant out for his arrest, was hired late last year by the city of St. Louis. Meantime, Officer Darren Wilson remains in hiding and will probably never get to wear a uniform again. He's out of a job. Joining me now, Arthur Aidala, who's a New York trial attorney and Fox News legal analyst, and Mark Eiglarsh, who's a former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney. Now, apparently Dorian Johnson only held his job with the city of St. Louis for 1 month, and we don't know what happened to end that employment. But why isn't he, as Mayor Giuliani suggested, being charged with perjury, Arthur, for making up a lie that caused a lot of damage?
It's prosecutorial discretion. In other words, they've decided not to. Clearly, the evidence is there, or there's enough evidence to bring charges. Whether there's enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that's up to a jury to make that decision. But clearly, a prosecutor has enough evidence. If this case is handled, Megan, like every other case in America is, in a small police department, the evidence is there. A much more thorough investigation was done of this matter that's done of any other type of matter where arrests are handed out like this. I think he should be arrested. I think anyone who tells a lie that ruins the life of another individual intentionally needs to be held accountable. Justice must be done.
But there's no question that the FBI interviewed this man and that he likely testified before the grand jury, so testimony must have been given under oath. We've seen many people charged with felonies for lying to the FBI.
It's a federal crime.
Remember Scooter Libby? And yet no charges for him. Mark, do you think it's appropriate?
Well, let's just say this. It depends on what the evidence is. I disagree with Arthur, who says that there is sufficient proof to bring this case. If there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest burden under the law, that number one, he lied, and then they have evidence, in spite of not having some type of confession where he says to somebody, yeah, I lied, I made that up, then what you've got is a guy who can argue that it's believability versus accuracy. He believed that his hands were up and maybe he heard something.
He believed that he was turning around, running away with his hands up, begging the officer not to shoot, when in fact,
I'm not buying it,
in fact, Michael Brown, according to the witnesses, was running towards the officer without his hands up and not surrendering.
But I'm not on that jury. Neither are you and neither is Arthur.
No,
you've got to convince those people beyond a reasonable doubt, and the evidence, I don't think, is sufficient, in spite of what we in the court of public opinion may feel.
They put Martha Stewart, Mark, in jail for months and months and months on the same thing. Did you know about the stock transfer? Will you get tipped off? Yes or no? She said no, and they proved that she was. Here,
Arthur,
I'm not saying there's enough proof to prove it, but there's definitely enough proof to bring those charges 100%.
Well, you don't bring charges unless there's sufficient proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And here's the other thing. You would pack the prisons with law enforcement officers, eyewitnesses who you know, Arthur, on a daily basis are lying in every single courthouse in this great land.
But what about the harm here? Obviously, Officer Wilson's life is ruined. Police officers have been executed in different cities. I'm not linking it directly to Dorian Johnson, but certainly that false narrative played into the animus we've seen against police officers. And the city of Ferguson, Arthur, taking a huge hit on its real estate values. They're saying that, oh gosh, I have it here in front of me. Let me try to find it. But in any event, the real estate values in that city have plummeted. Oh, in 2014, the average home was selling for $66,000 plus. Last year, it went down to $36,000, and this year it's down to now $22,000. That's just some of the damage done there. Not all because of him, but in part.
Megan, you had football players. You had basketball players who were being viewed by millions, tens of millions of people putting their hands up. And it turns out, it seems like, if you believe these investigations, that was made up. It's one thing if you make a mistake. Oh, I think Arthur committed the crime, but it was really Ablo, and you have 2 white men the same age, the same height, they're both bald. That's a mistake. That's an honest mistake. But if you say somebody went like this, put their hands up when they didn't, that's just an outright lie to incite people, and you're ruining lives.
Saying it so, I don't disagree with you, the harm is there, but saying it so, don't make it so. If you don't have the proof, you don't bring charges.
But it's
Wait,
a whole bunch of other people
I
not
gotta
saying he
go.
didn't
It's
put his
over
hands
between
up.
us. It's been a pleasure. Stay tuned, though.